Alex, stop your dreaming. Can't you see their spear points gleaming? See their warrior pennons streaming to this battlefield.
Sing!
Men of Alex, stand ye steady.
Come on, sing!
Cannot be ever said.
I've never been a particularly big fan of the Imperial Guard, or Astra Militarum as they're sometimes called, but there's just something special about these goofy little chaps, the Praetorian Guard. There's something just really, really cool about this idea of some spiffing chaps up in space, bludgeoning aliens and the like. Now, I did a previous video on these, harking back a little bit about the original models and all those kind of things, and I decided I wanted to do some of my own, so I picked up some Cadian Shock Troopers and decided to turn these into some Praetorian Guard. Now, they've got a variety of really cool poses, so very, very cool, and I had to get some spare heads and some other bits from Anvil Industries. I'd highly recommend these. There are some other options that you can use. I think I see some out in Australia, but for me these were great. They're relatively local, quick to turn up, and they look the part. So I got some backpacks, some heads, and some of those fully armed things I can never remember the name of. Now, I began cutting these away. This is my first time ever working with resin, so this was bound to get interesting, and I'm sure, as you're going to see throughout this, there was an absolute load of calamity going on. I managed to file some bits down, get them looking a little bit smoother, but altogether they looked cool enough to go on the model. I did some of those shoulder things as well, which would just spring off absolutely everywhere. One fired off and landed in my fucking drink, so I couldn't drink that anymore, which is just absolutely magnificent. Obviously had no intention of drinking that after that had happened. So I carried on cutting these away and just hopefully not losing any, but this is all to be in vain anyway, as you'll see shortly. So we get over to the shock troops themselves. Obviously had to take these out of the box. A little bit of unboxing cheeky goodness here for you. Those little nerds who love seeing things get taken out of boxes. Obviously we have the instructions, and we wanted to start off with, I guess, a captain of some sort. Anyway, that's the guy, our leader. We're going to start with him. And he's going to be the subject of pretty much most of today's video in terms of looking at the painting. So obviously went about snipping him off his sprue and setting him up. It was relatively easy instructions. Very, very simple to follow, and of course I had to do little bits of cleanup. Now, a word of warning, if you are here for a painting tutorial from someone who's good at painting, I'm not your man. But there we go, we'll get to that in a minute. The aim here was to get as many done with contrast paints as possible and then just do minimal touch-ups with other colours. But I digress, back to building the model. So yeah, again, pretty straightforward for the most part. Some of these models were an absolute pain in the arse. This one was not one of them. As you can see here, fuck this guy. Just really impossible to build. Some of them didn't seem to sit correctly no matter what I did. I swiveled them around, ended up with gaps and all kinds. Just an absolute ball ache to do. But overall, the set is kind of good, the kit is nice, and here we are with our finished minis. Well, I say finished, mostly built. Now for next, I need to start sticking their heads on, backpacks and things like that. I was a bit of an idiot and didn't realise that a lot of these have the backpacks built into the models, so I couldn't actually really use most of them, so that didn't really go to plan. We kind of had to shave one of them down, I think, to get one to work. I also used some really cheap super glue at first, which didn't go particularly well, but I used a better one. I tried the shoulder things, this didn't work, they just didn't sit correct. Maybe on the older versions of the models they did, but not on the new one. So I ended up with loads of spare parts, so I wasted a ton of money. So if you're thinking of getting these, save yourself some money. You can't really use much of anything other than the heads. Next up, I wanted to start sticking these models down to the bases. Some of the poses are so awkward, as you can see here. Kept knocking this motherfucker over. Just absolute pain in the arse. Yeah, we ended up having to resolve this by getting the guys to hug a little bit and lean on each other to hold them in place while their feet set to the base. And there we have it. Our models built, ready to be primed and painted. So here we go, bit of primer. I decided to go for more of a zenithal approach, a little bit loose rather than just the top down. So I just started off with a black here. In retrospect, I'd probably do this as a darker grey instead. But we went with black because it's just what I had available and I thought might work the nicest. Probably a little bit too harsh for the contrast paints we wanted to use. And then we went over the top with our white. Both of these are the GW sprays that I used. Colourforge is a great alternative, probably a bit better value for money. But this does the trick. Now, I went quite heavy on this because I wanted to get as many of those details, and as you can see here, we've very much just got black in the shadows underneath. I tried to do a little bit more from the front as well to catch some more of the details, knowing that we'd be leaving bits of white on the model as well. So we start off with Baal Red for our red, and this we're just going to be picking out bits like his coat and things like that, anything that should obviously be red from the way the old models look. We leave the chest plate, we're going to keep that white, and his trousers are going to be a blue, so we'll get to those shortly. And just a once-over with this worked really, really well. I didn't even need to thin this down, particularly straight out the pot worked great. One of the good things about contrast paints, you can thin them down for a little bit better like coverage and things like that if you're doing multiple layers, but this worked absolutely fine for me, and as you can see, did the job. Now, I did manage to get some on the tip here, which is really annoying. Obviously, you can just touch those up, but yeah, we powered on through and got the rest of our guys done. We used Ultramarines Blue for the legs. Give it a good shake, because of course that shit settles at the bottom. And then of course we just did those. I did omit the knee pads at first, but later on I actually touched these up. Originally I was going to keep them white, but I didn't like it. Next we had Black Legion for our black parts. We use that mostly for the boots at the moment, but we are going to go back on some of these, do touch-ups, do extra areas and things like that later on. But this is a really, really cool paint. I quite like this. I don't know much of the difference between this and the Black Templar paint, but this seems to do the job just fine. Next up we have Guilliman Flesh, the absolute hack if you can't paint and skin like me. And of course we just did the face and the hands with this, and this just, yeah, it does the job. There's not much to say really here. Another one of those painting hack paints that I'm sure everyone loves. And there we have it. All apart from our moustache is done. Face looking a little bit better. Next up we have Wildwood. This is another one I haven't used before. I used this to get in some of like the satchels and bags and belts and, you know, little straps and things like that. This is primarily what I used for that, and it worked quite nicely. Again, went on nice and easy. I got the coverage was really, really good. Just overall a big fan of this paint, one I'll definitely use in future. Next up we had the Apothecary White. It was Apothecary, I don't know. That fucking one. Anyway, it looks like grey, but actually when it goes on it looks really good. You know, with the kind of grey, white, dusty looking colour, and that was actually working quite well for me. I was surprised by how much I liked this. At first it was a little bit unsold because it does just look grey when you first put it on, but when it dries it does look really, really cool, especially with white underneath. We went back to our Ultramarines Blue to touch up some bits, especially those knee pads as I mentioned earlier. Get rid of those fucking things. They were really, really annoying to paint around and didn't look particularly good anyway. For our whites and touch-ups, we used Pro Acryl to go over and just touch up any areas that I'd picked out wrong. We had used Lead Belcher for any metals, and just dry brush that, for example, onto the chainsword here, and then we're going to put a layer over the top anyway, but it just gives that nice metallic look. Nice and simple, of course. The only problem here is that it does sometimes hit the other parts of the model, but again, you can just go touch things up, and this worked absolutely fine. Over white doesn't look quite as nice as over black, but it did the job. Of course, the next painting hack is Nuln Oil, as we know. We've got Imperial Fist Yellow here, which we used for the moustache and the like. And there we have it. There's our moustache, and of course we've touched up those paints. We also went back with Black Legion to get the back of the chainsword there. We have the brown here for the base. Thundia Brown or something like that it's called, I can't remember. We used a Vallejo Fluorescent Green and Hexwraith Flame. This was for the plasma gun that I used, and you can see the results here. Looking pretty cool, very, very simple to do, and it looks the part. Really, really happy with the result there. Back to Imperial Fist Yellow, just to get some more of those details, and then we're shading it down with Seraphim Sepia to do things like the helmets and the like. And then onto our basing. So we use some of these little tufts that I've never ever used before, but they work quite the part. Just touch those up. Of course, we get that Badland on the bottom there. That seemed to be really, really cool. Almost this like muddy, dusty look. Just something lighter than the rest of the base. Nice contrast to the rest of the model. And of course, we add our bits and bobs. And here is the end result. Now, for something that I did in relatively quick fashion, with mostly contrast paints, trying to make this as easy as possible, I'm pretty happy with the end results. They look decent enough under the lights, they look decent enough in the display, and that's all I really wanted. So again, certainly not going to be tabletop standard, I would particularly say, or maybe it is, I suppose. Certainly nothing display standard, but it's going to go in the back of my cupboard somewhere, so it doesn't really matter. Now, if you enjoyed this video, or you're interested in picking up... Now, if you've enjoyed this video, maybe consider hitting subscribe, leave some comments down below on what you might do differently, or if this has helped you, certainly let me know. If you're looking to pick up any of the bits from this video, I'll put some links down in the description. Now, as a word of warning, some of those will be affiliate links, so I will get a bit of a kickback from some of them, not all of them, but hopefully that'll help you if you're considering doing exactly the same. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in in the next one.